be the Regional Partnership Manager throughout the initiative. And we'll just go around the table to my left here.
Levon Nelson with the Illinois Community College Board.
Jim Nelson, the Illinois Manufacturers Association.
Jill Meskey with DCEO, the Project Director for the WIF Initiative.
Jerry Ewart with DCEO. I'll be working with the WIF Evaluator, statewide evaluator.
Okay. We want to thank everyone for joining us again. This webinar will be recorded so that it can be accessed later. So if you have any of your peers or colleagues that you think ought to be exposed to this material, please feel free to let them know the Illinois WorkNet website. It's illinoisworknet.com/innovation partnerships, and that address will be in the PowerPoint as we go through, so you'll have it. And it's good to see a couple folks that have attended some of the sessions already signed up again today. That's good to see. And it looks like we got a lot of people on the line here, so let's jump into this. And we will allow time for questions at the end. So we hope to get through the PowerPoint quickly and cleanly without a lot of questions, and then leave plenty of time at the end to answer any questions that might come up. So let's just get started. Next slide, please. Chelsea, can I advance the slides, or do you have to do that?
I think you have the ability. Go ahead and look down at the bottom. There you go.
Got it. Okay, great.
Okay.
That way I don't have to bug you with doing that. Super. Okay. Here are the state partners that are involved in the initiative. As you can see, kind of the standard players. The new player, but perhaps the most important player, is the Manufacturing Learning Exchange, and we're going to talk more about why that's important as we go through the presentation. Again, here is the splash page for the WIF initiative if you haven't seen it yet. This will be out there as we go through the initiative as a resource for you all. It will include categorized Q&A, and also the RFA is out there, the DCO standard grant application is out there, and this presentation will be out there after today. Upcoming events and calendar events will be here, and again, Q's and A's as we go through the initiative and get the evaluator on board and learn more about it. So please bookmark this page if you are going to be interested in pursuing this, because this is going to be your first stop for finding out additional information and a key resource for you. Okay, again, Mike and Jerry are the main contacts for you all as we go through this. Most of you know how to reach us already. Okay, here's the big picture. DOL and their national evaluator, APT associates, are trying to create a quantitative evaluation of innovation projects. So they are asking, can the programs that are typically involved in this sort of thing work together to find a better way to serve clients, and the clients being individuals that have barriers to employment and employers that have a need for skilled workers and are having a hard time finding them. And then can we demonstrate that whatever innovation technique that we come up with makes a difference? And if it makes a difference, how big of a difference did it make? So the key thing here is this is going to be very evaluation driven, and we're going to talk more about that in greater detail later. But this is not going to be a situation where we try something and then we write up a 10 to 50 page report about what happened, and that will suffice for DOL. This time they are doing a complete summative statistical evaluation with t-tests and z-tests and assignment into treatment and control groups, and we're going to go into detail on all of that as we go through this today. But just know that this is not going to be your standard kind of a project that we've embarked on, at least in my tenure here in workforce development. Again, statistically sound evaluation principles will guide the evaluation. We will have a treatment and control group, and then measure the difference between those groups at the end of the treatment cycle. This will require everybody to track people in both groups. As people come in, they will get assigned to each group, and we'll have to keep track of everybody in both of those groups. So it'll be serious effort at data collection and data management that is important to the evaluation. And if it's not done, then the evaluation can't be done. So DOL and the national evaluator are going to be working, watching us very closely to make sure that, everything is collected so that the evaluation piece can be done properly. So that means those of you on the front line of making this happen have to make sure you collect all that data. Then, after the innovation period ends, then the evaluator here at the state will go to work and we'll figure out what happens statistically. So how are we trying to do this in Illinois? Overall, because we're targeting manufacturing, one of the issues, as those of you who work with clients know, sometimes particular manufacturing training can be intensive and lengthy, depending on the skill level of the individual coming in. The problem is most of those people find it very difficult to be in training full time and not working and having income coming in. So we want to make sure that, can we accelerate the training and accelerate the process, from recruitment and intake until they get that job. What can we do to accelerate that process to get people into training and into a good job as fast as possible? So in this initiative, some of the key things we're going to focus on being led by the manufacturing sector, meaning we want the demand of the sector and the needs of the employers to drive what we do. Because at the end of the day, we need to provide a product, meaning skilled workers, that meets the needs of employers. And if we don't do that, then we're running people through training, but to no real great end. So we need to be mindful of what the needs of the employers are and let that guide how we build our innovation and how we provide services through this initiative. We also want to leverage the Illinois Pathways Initiative. That's been out there for about a year now, and the implementation grants were issued just a couple months ago. Manufacturing was one of the sectors that received an implementation grant, and so they are proceeding on building learning exchanges across the state. Now, one of the key elements of the Illinois Pathways Initiative is regional learning exchanges, built on the needs of the employers and working with the education community regionally so that partnerships develop and can build a long-term solution to finding skilled or providing skilled workers for manufacturing. So this effort also requires regional partnerships. So we're hoping that partnerships that develop up for the Workforce Innovation Fund initiative will foster the creation of regional learning exchanges in manufacturing. So they've already started on some groundwork. We're going to start on this. It's a very symbiotic relationship where each initiative can help the other one along its path. So it's a very good timing opportunity for all of us to kind of do two things at once, kill two birds with one stone, if you will. Okay, we talked about accelerated service delivery. And then also we want to focus on thinking of new ways of doing business. We'll get into this in a little more detail a little bit later, but the key thing is DOL and the evaluator are asking us, think outside the box. Let's be innovative and come up with ways that we could find or do something better, faster, or stronger, to use the old cliche, than we have before. So be thinking of ways that we could be creative, and don't limit yourself to traditionally accepted barriers or traditionally accepted or statutory regulatory requirements. We have some latitude here to be creative, so it would behoove us to take it. And then also, again, back to the evaluation, which is driving the whole thing. Whatever we do innovation-wise has to be measurable. So basically that's it. We've got to be able to measure whatever changes that the innovation brings about to determine if it was useful or not. Okay, back to the manufacturing sector. Again, meeting our demand. We talk about public-private partnerships and meeting demand. In the context of this initiative, meeting demand means having a workforce with the right skills, right quantity, right place, right time. Okay? Essentially, it's a pull model, not a push model. Push model meaning, we train a bunch of people and then hope we can find them jobs later. The pull model is let's let the needs of the employers guide what we do. so that we are training folks that when they complete the training, for most people, there's a job waiting for them at the end of it to the fullest extent possible. Okay, we spoke about the Illinois Pathways Initiative already. If anyone is not familiar with this, there is a page on Illinois WorkNet fully devoted to Illinois Pathways. You could search in WorkNet for it, or I don't know the address right offhand, but it's out there. So if you would like to learn more about it, you could search inside Illinois WorkNet, and there's a whole big page and lots of material on it out there.
It's ilpathways.com.
Ah, thank you, Jim. ilpathways.com. And there it is. Thank you, Chelsea. Okay, now I'll turn it over to Jill, and she's going to speak to this slide.
Yes, I wanted to take just a minute to continue talking about the big picture of the project. In particular, with this the technical proposal that we submitted to Department of Labor, what we were addressing there was the fact that studies had shown that regional partnerships could lead to effective service delivery and giving us positive impacts for employers and workers. So in moving forward with that, what we're talking about is with the regional partnerships is that we have at the table, we have workforce, education, economic development, we have employers, manufacturing businesses, industry. In recognizing that, part of what our strategy is to also do work not just at the regional level, but at the state level, knowing that we need to support and assist the regional partnerships as they're formed and as they're implemented and as they're sustained. So at the state level, that's why we have our state partners, everybody having a role to play, an important role to play in the success of the project. So as we mentioned, Community College Board, Department of Employment Security, Illinois Manufacturers Association is the Manufacturing Learning Exchange. So everybody has an important role to play, and throughout this project, each entity is going to be assisting with the project, and I guess an important role to play is as you're forming your regional partnerships or as you're implementing the regional partnerships, is to keep in mind that you can turn to these entities for assistance. You may be trying to structure something, develop something, have questions. So Mike Baker is the key contact for the regional partnerships. He's the one overseeing the regional partnerships, but at the same time, he's going to be working very closely with his counterparts at each of these agencies. So as issues come up, it's important that you express those issues to Mike, and he can then assist in whatever way to help you with the issues. So again, I just wanted to talk about it from the big picture standpoint, that there are a lot of resources for you to assist all of us with the project. And just going over the points that are mentioned there, I mentioned that the initiative is to positively impact employer and worker outcomes. In the technical proposal and in the RFA, it does lay those out in detail, but basically we're just wanting, efficiency and effectiveness in outcomes for both employers and workers. The other part that we'll be dealing with at the state level has to do with recognizing that state policies, guidelines, there might need to be some changes made to, as we go through the project, we need to address policies that, I guess, two situations. One that might need to be changed or tweaked, or in some cases it could be that there's just a misunderstanding at the local level on a particular policy, and maybe it's too restrictive and it doesn't need to be so. So again, with all the state agencies coming together, we are going to address state policies and guidelines. The third item is the State Labor Market Management Information Systems, recognizing that with this project there's going to be a lot of work done at that level with those systems to assist not only with this project and gathering the data, but long-term in making some changes to the systems. The last item deals with the performance accountability, continuous improvement, and the evaluation system. Again, this project is very closely looked at from an evaluation standpoint, and we'll be sharing the metrics with you as we go along with the project and work with the evaluator. But there are many systems that will be implemented, and an opportunity then to show, as a part of this project, the impact that this strategy is having as far as the regional partnerships and having everybody at the table, the features that we've talked about, the innovation, acceleration, that type of thing. The result will be that we'll be able to show the improvement, and that with this grant award, there is accountability and success with the project. So that's all I had, Mike, as far as the big picture.
Okay, thank you, Jill. Okay, we spoke about this slide already, the need for training and also to do it quickly. So we don't need to hit that again, I don't think. Okay, again, we spoke to the first point. Okay, so there are two ways to go about innovation. One is, what can we do today? And this is partially what Jill was speaking to. There may be innovation things that could be tried using or within the confines of current statutory, regulatory, and policy requirements, but maybe a new partner is at the table, or like, for instance, new partners to help with recruitment. Lots of different examples of that. Or maybe a policy could be looked at again and said, well, we've always kind of interpreted it this way, but if we look at it again, there may be some latitude to do something slightly differently. Okay, so that's one way. However, we would encourage folks to think outside the box a little bit and think about, if you've ever had, and I know we've all had this, over the years, the thought that, if we could just get rid of this one thing, other than the basic core requirements of the Act, like eligibility or performance or things like that. But if there was something that has been a typical barrier that we've had to deal with, if that wasn't there, we may have the latitude to try to go around that under this initiative. So don't be hemmed in your thinking that it has to be strictly the way we've always operated, because we do have the chance to try something different. So go ahead and get together with your partners as you form your groups, and let us know, when you're in your application, what it is you want to try. If it's too far off the deep end, we'll have a conversation about it. We may have to talk with DOL or the National Evaluator about it, and may work with you to modify it to get it within everyone's comfort level. But at least initially, don't be constrained by traditional thinking on how we've gone about our business in the past. Okay? Hopefully we can take all the programs that have some sort of touch on individuals that would be eligible for the program and find a way to work together to maximize the effort, streamline it, and coordinate it so that we get the biggest return on investment from each of the partners' participation. All of these programs listed here do intake and assessment. If you look in the far right-hand box, there are other programs like TANF and food stamps that touch folks that could be eligible for the program, but we may or may not have a very strong relationship with them depending on what your area is. I mean, some areas have stronger relationships, some areas have weaker relationships with those programs. So, if you have a weak relationship, or you think if you have a good relationship but it could be better, feel free to reach out to those folks and say, hey, we have this initiative going. We're going to need a decent amount of recruitment to get folks into it. Touch base with those folks and see if they can funnel people your way. I mean, that's a great way to maybe change the way we do business within the confines of current policy, but will certainly have a great impact on the number of people that might be touched by the innovation. Okay. So if you look at it at the partner level rather than the program, like who does what in here, again, the WorkNet centers, community colleges, training providers, all do intake and assessment. So it behooves us to try to reach out to everyone along this chain, and there are lots of other programs that wouldn't fit on this without the type getting too small to read. But the idea is, think about how each of these partners could play a role in the innovation, and there are lots of different partners that could add value. So I encourage you all to think outside the box on people you may not have traditionally done business with. Did you have a comment?
I also wanted to make a statement. This is LaVon from ICCB on the first improved coordination of programs and improved coordination of services. Don't forget, a critical component of this also, as you're thinking of partners and entities, are the business and industry centers and continuing ed of the community colleges. Continuing education does quite a bit of short industry-recognized credentials, and business and industry centers do, they're the ones that do the customized training, corporate training, and work to a large extent with all industries, but do a huge amount of business with manufacturers across the state. So they have great contacts, great insights, and can be very useful in this process, as can the continuing education department. So just wanted to make sure we pointed that out.
And we're kind of done with the big overview, so if anyone around the table would have any general comments they'd like to make, you're welcome to, otherwise we can plow ahead. So. Okay. All right, so the general timeline, as you've seen in the RFA, if you have seen the RFA, we've asked folks to let us know of their intent to apply by January 28th. And then 3 weeks after that, on February 18th, is the deadline to file an application. Okay. So those are the two big dates you need to worry about at this point. Going forward from that, we hope to get all the applications reviewed. If anything requires a discussion back and forth so that we better understand limit that DCO accounting will give us to issue a grant through the state requirements, the State Finance Act. But we may have the opportunity to mod those later on down the road to extend them if the whole initiative does get extended. So we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, but at least initially everyone will have 2 years for program performance. And then after that, there'll be a 1-year period of evaluation so that the state evaluators can work with the national evaluator, create that evaluation and learn what happened, do all the statistical analysis, and create the report to determine, what worked and what difference it made and the level of difference it made. Okay, shifting to talking about regions. It's up to you all to find the right mix of partners and geographical areas that will be suitable for having a successful initiative. So regions will self-select. For those of you that were around for CSSI, that was the deal where we used the economic development regions and said, okay, everybody kind of pair up based on those. We have some latitude to be a little more innovative here, so we're leaving it all up to you to determine, who you're going to work with and the area you're going to cover. Organizations theoretically could be part of multiple regional efforts, depending on where your service areas overlap. I know downstate, and Jim, if you'd like to speak to this, feel free. They are, as part of the Manufacturing Learning Exchange, starting out at least, looking at things by community college districts because those districts cover a relatively wide area. Now, up in Chicagoland, where the schools are all on top of one another, that's a little bit different dynamic, but at least downstate, that is how the manufacturing folks are starting to look at it. So, to the extent that you folks can look at that as well, that would be great, but you're not absolutely limited to that. I mean, there are different ways regions could come together. So we just want to give you some latitude to pull in the right partners to meet the need of employers in your region. Because that's what it all boils down to. Think about how are we forming this and who's at the table that can meet the needs of the employers in whatever region it is you're working to define. Okay. However, we will ask you all to explain to us how your region came together. Who was at the table, why are they there? If there's an obvious person that is not, or organization that's not at the table, it would behoove you to explain that because we're probably going to ask you about it. So just explain to us, how the region came together and why the people that are at the table. Again, this is willing partners. No one's going to be forced to come together to make this initiative happen. And because of that, we expect that the partners that do participate are fully engaged, fully cooperative, and willing to innovate. There will need to be structured MOUs and partner agreements defining what each partner is going to do and when. And we're not going to be impressed by letters of support. I mean, those are nice to have, but there are partners, and then there are partners. And we want the partners with the big P at the table in this. So, you need to have folks that are willing to put in writing what it is they're going to do to help out the initiative and work that out with them on the front side. Okay. Now, we know for the application that, when you go into the MOU and partner agreement route, you're going to get the attorneys involved, which that's part of the deal, and that will take a while. So for the application, as long as you can give us something in writing, an email or a letter from the executive director or the board chair, the decision-making folks at the organization, if you can give us a letter or an email from those folks saying, yes, we're in, we understand, here's what our roles are going to be, and lay that out for us, that's fine for the application. But you'll need to have the MOU or the legal partner agreement completed and signed before you receive the grant. Okay. Going back to my earlier comment about wanting to keep the manufacturing folks and the needs of the employers at the forefront of this initiative, it's been decided that we need to have a project manager with sector and program experience from outside the ranks of the partners. Okay. The idea being that the initiative is bigger than any one of the partners, so the project manager should not be an employee of or beholden to any one of the partners. And also, and this happened to me as well, and I know it happened to some folks, by a few folks, on top of the duties they were already doing. So they were splitting time between CSSI and their regular work. For the project manager, that's a role that's vital to the success of each partnership and filling the needs of the employers. So it needs to be somebody that can devote full-time attention to it. So think of this person fulfilling the role kind of like the NFL or Major League Baseball commissioner. They work at the behest of all the partners, but they're independent from each individual partner, so they work for the benefit of the entire group. Okay. So who can come in for a grant? Local workforce boards or the fiscal agents are going to be the applicants of record. Okay. Because this is, and we'll come into this, it's a WIA project, WIA funding, WIA eligibility goes into it. We need to have folks that understand WIA eligibility and be in charge of that. Okay. The applicant of record, should be the area of better history of meeting performance expenditure goals if you have 2 local areas or 3 or 4 local areas that are going together. We would kind of look at the track record of the LWIAs that are coming together, and it'd be preferable if the one that has the best track record in meeting performance and not having findings, etc., is the lead entity. Covered that. Okay, so once you get your grant, who can you let into the grant? Because it's an innovation project and the evaluation is at play, where we want to compare services of innovation versus a control group. And we'll talk more about that in a little while. But that means you can't let people that are already in the system into the initiative. So it's got to be people that are recruited new. So that means we're going to have to work together to find creative and new ways to recruit a sizable number of folks to get down to the target that we're looking for. People that are eligible for WIA adult or dislocated services may be admitted to the program, and we're hoping to have a treatment group of at least 600 folks statewide. Typical WIA offender, any particular group like that. I mean, just, they can be let in, but they're not the specific target of the initiative. Now, we did find something out last week that may be an evolving situation, but here's what we know about it at this point in time. According to the federal evaluator, veterans may be directly assigned to the treatment group in this initiative. We'll talk more about assignment into treatment and control groups in a few minutes, but just know that when we have that conversation, that won't apply to veterans. Veterans will count toward the headcount targets. We'll have to track their performance and their outcomes for just like any other client in the initiative, but they will be excluded from the evaluation, and the evaluator at the state and federal level will figure out a way to make that happen. So you folks don't have to worry about that too much, just to know that when it comes to assigning veterans into the two groups, the veterans can go into the treatment group. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to Jerry Eward now, and he's going to speak about evaluation issues.
Good morning. The National Workforce Innovation Fund requires the use of a third-party evaluator. And Illinois is in the process of procuring their evaluator, which will include a full-time project manager. The role of the third-party evaluator will be initially to advance and expand the state's evaluation plan as it was submitted with the technical proposal and subsequently revised. With the evaluation design plan, the evaluator will establish the level of rigor. That is, they'll set the treatment to control group rate or ratio using random assignment. Random assignment is required by the WIF National Evaluation Coordinator and by DOL. The evaluator, the state's evaluator, will also establish evaluation metrics, and in so doing will identify the data sources, how the data will be analyzed, and how final outcomes will be developed and eventually reported in the evaluation report at the end of the project. The evaluation design as established by the state's evaluator is subject to review and approval by the National Evaluation Coordinator and DOL. And criteria that may come out of the National DOL office or the National Evaluation Coordinator. An example of that is, like Mike just mentioned, with the Vets Priority of Service that we just found out about. Had our evaluator been in place and the design had been in place, there would be some adjustment to the design because of that.
You ready to move on?
The next, the third-party evaluator will develop the process for random assignment that you will use in your regional partnerships. Included in that will be steps for obtaining informed consent from the participants. So they'll know up front whether they're going to end up, or that there's a possibility they'll end up in the treatment group and the control group, and will before random assignment ever takes place, and that they'll be required to follow whichever group they end up being pushed into. The statewide goal, as Mike mentioned, is 600 individuals for the treatment group. The size of the control group is unknown. It will be dependent again on the evaluation design that our third-party evaluator ultimately develops, and that will be one of the first things he does, and we'll get that information out to you as soon as we know about it. You'll see the whole design. But the one thing that we've heard, it could be as bad as 50-50 or 70-30, something in between. We really won't know until the evaluator does his job. The participants in the treatment group will receive the care and services that the control group would be referred to local WorkNet centers for usual WIA and partner services, local partner services. So, next. You want to talk about these?
Yeah, sure. Part of the thing that we would expect to see some innovation around is recruitment. Instituto del Progreso Latino in Chicago did a similar effort to this in the recent past, and they cast a very wide net and then got down to the folks that were actually eligible and viable for their initiative. So they reached out to 2,000 recruits, had contact with 2,000 people, and that yielded 700 folks that came in and said, yeah, we're interested in this, or we'd like to know more about it, or we think, I'm a good fit for this program. Okay. Then they had funding to do a treatment group of 50 people and a control group of 50 people, so 100 people. So of that 700, they ended up enrolling 100 because that was the limit of their funding. So we won't ever know how many people out of those 700 would have actually been eligible. Maybe it would have been 125, maybe it would have been 500 or 600. We'll never know. But the point is that we will have to cast a wide net to reach the folks to hit 600 people in the treatment group. So you can't rely on folks just walking in off the street to the one-stops or the WorkNet centers or traditional avenues where we recruit folks. This will take a concerted effort on behalf of all the partners to reach out to people to bring more folks into the mix. Especially the first is a criminal background check. This is a varying degree of an issue with various employers, depending on what they do. But note that for most manufacturers, and Jim, if you'd like to add to this, feel free, the background check is a litmus test on honesty, because the background check will reveal all this stuff if somebody has a record. So if an applicant didn't reveal that in their application, and the manufacturer finds out about it after the fact, then they realize they may have an issue of honesty with the individual and they're probably not going to be hired. But if the individual was honest about it, then they know that's not an issue, and if the employer thinks the individual has the right skills and would be a good fit for their environment, the background becomes less of an issue. Anything you'd like to add to that, Jim?
Yeah, I think the bottom line here is if individual applicants or candidates within the program are honest with us up front, and we want them based on their skill level or potential to achieve a reasonable skill level, we'll get around whatever that conviction is. It gives us the option at that point, but it won't be as hard a litmus test as it would be if someone failed to disclose a conviction that they should have. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yes. However, one thing that is pass-fail is a drug test. If a client can't pass a drug test, many employers will not even want to touch them. So what we have to figure out is a way that how can we weed out the folks that are not going to be a viable candidate for a manufacturing job after they get their training, because we don't want to waste their time in going through training for a job that they can't get. We don't want to waste the trainer's time in providing the service, and we certainly don't want to squander the money that could have been spent on somebody that was viable on someone that is not necessarily a good fit for manufacturing. So we're thinking that you know, and this can be funded through the WIF initiative. Through, you know, the WIF grant can pay for this, but there needs to be a way to find some innovation to get down to viable candidates before the training begins. Okay. So the question then, if Instituto's experience, going back to this slide, was how many of those actually are viable for manufacturing? So that's what we have to work to make sure that we find a way to get folks that are in the initiative that are a good fit for a manufacturing occupation. Okay, now back to Jerry.
Okay. Finally, in terms of the data collection, for customer demographic and service data, the IWDS system will be used for both the control and the treatment group. So participants will be, you know, tracked through IWDS much like they are right now, with any changes that we have to make according to what the evaluator, additional information he may want to collect according to the evaluator metrics and design, evaluation design. In addition to that, there'll be partner systems with information available that will be, sharing will be set up from, like, certainly IDES and the educational partners, as well as necessary to meet the evaluation metrics set up by the evaluator. In addition, there'll likely be baseline surveys and surveys taken throughout the project, mostly at the beginning and the end, to collect data that the evaluator has designed or has identified as being needed for certain evaluation metrics that might be in the design plan. That's certainly a possibility, and probably likely there'll be some surveys. Again, the partnership must track both the treatment and control groups for service and outcomes. Just to recap, the treatment group will be getting those services. Go to the next one.
Sorry, Jerry.
They'll be getting those services on the left there that are been identified by the regional partnership. And they'll be in the WIF performance outcome metrics, but they will not be in the traditional WIA common performance measure. The control group, on the other hand, they'll receive the customary local funded services and referrals to, you know, as appropriate. Their outcomes will be the same as the treatment, except they will also be, because they're using WIA formula or statewide dollars, they'll be in the standard WIA common performance measures, if they do in fact receive WIA funding for services. So the last slide is, it says on the plus side, it may not necessarily be on the plus side, but the treatment group will not be in WIA performance, as I just mentioned. The control group will, and that's, you know, if you think about it, maybe we'd be better off if the treatment group was, because it might increase WIA performance, but that is absolutely would go counter to what they're trying to evaluate here. So that's all I have.
So again, just to put on one slide the services that can be provided to the control group. You know, the customary level of service that they would have received had they walked in off the street and never heard of WIF can be given to those folks. This has to be funded by regional resources, not the WIF resources. But they do have to be tracked like the treatment group. And this next to last stop point is kind of in the best possible scenario. Ideally, those folks in the control group would not be placed on a waiting list because we'd like to compare services that were received under the innovation to services received under the regular customary care. And ideally, if folks are put on a waiting list, that's not a real great comparison for how the services differed, because the only difference is the treatment group had funding and the other go on a waiting list. That's the reality, and we understand that. However, it does call into question, be mindful of who you're bringing into the partnership so that you don't end up in a situation where everybody in the control group has to go to a waiting list. If you have enough local areas together, you should have enough funding to get as many folks as possible into the control group. So the idea is, if one area has very little funding to absorb a control group, you partner up with another area or areas that can help out in that respect so that everybody in your region that went to the control group doesn't go on a waiting list. So, here's the cheering section. Get out there and innovate. For the treatment group, be thinking about how to accelerate, any and all of these things. This is not meant to be a comprehensive list. It's just to kind of get the ideas going and get you thinking about some things you might want to try. Certainly the intake and assessment and entry into skill upgrade training, there ought to be ways to accelerate that. Can some of these services be provided simultaneously, or can they be provided so that the gap between them is shortened? Any way that you can shave time off of providing these services, but still make sure the individual has the credentials they need at the end of the training so they're suitable for employment is fair game. So again, this is not a comprehensive list, just a list of things to kind of get the ideas flowing. Okay. There are, as always, with federal funding, there are fiscal issues. Fortunately, because the grantees of record are going to be the local workforce areas. You guys are familiar with most of this, if not all of this already. But for the partners that may not be aware of some of the restrictions that go with it, Sheila Sloan from our fiscal staff is going to speak to these briefly. So Sheila, just let me know when you want me to move forward on the point.
Okay. Good morning. And I know most of you probably already know about the set of cost principles that OMB has put out. I have them listed here, and you have to follow the specific cost principles that are applicable to the type of organization that you are with. As you can see there's some for state and local governments. There's institutions of higher education. There's a set for nonprofit organizations and a set for commercial organizations. Most of the OWIAs already follow when you have federal funds that you're expending. Next slide. In addition to those cost principles, there's a set of uniform administrative requirements, which gives a little more detail and the implementing rules for following these cost principles, and some specific information about what you must follow, what your financial systems must look like, how to account for your grant funds, procurement issues, just all sorts of things. Makes for interesting reading if you're, want to go to sleep really fast. And they can be lengthy, but you must follow these rules based on your organization type. Next one. There's also several other type of requirements that go along with having federal funds. I have them all listed here. They're fairly basic. They're normal. As most of you have gotten grants before, in the federal funds from any source, you know that you have to follow these rules. Feel free to look them up and read them. I'm not going to detail all of them out, but just just know that you must follow these rules if you do get any of these funds from this grant program. Next one. And of course, with federal funds, there are certain conditions that must be met for costs to be incurred and charged to the grant. They must be necessary, and what that means is that they are necessary to achieve the grant objective. They must be reasonable. The cost must be in line with kind of a standard market costs that are out there for the same type of service or good that you're procuring or purchasing. And just kind of the prudent use thing goes back to the prudent person theory. If it was in your checking account, would you consider it reasonable to purchase that with your money? They also must be allocable, and what that means is that they are for the grant, for the purpose of the grant, so that you have the ability to allocate those costs to that grant. So it basically goes back require approval for them to be allowed to be charged to a grant. And there are some that are listed in some of those requirements I listed before in those references, the uniform administrative requirements and the cost principles. If prior approval requirement does exist, you must get that approval before incurring that cost. You must request it in writing, and it must be approved. And the approval has to be given to you by your awarding entity, which in this case would probably be us at DCEO. You may have some costs that are listed in your grant agreement that, yeah, you're going to spend the money on this. However, don't assume because it's in your grant agreement that you have the approval to go ahead and do that. You still must follow the approval conditions that are established in the cost principles and administrative requirements. And like I said, the approval request would be to the awarding agency, which in this case would be us at DCEO. Next. There are some specific costs that under WIA are basically unallowable. Some of those are listed here. Economic development is one of them. Entertainment, losses, fines and penalties, and any kind of a contingency reserve. So keep that in mind as you're developing your budgets and determining what kind of expenditures you're going to have in this grant. Okay, now next is the big topic everybody loves to talk about is procurement. The uniform administrative requirements do specify that you must have full and open competition when you are procuring items related to federal grants and federal funds. Whatever organization receives the grant, which in these cases are probably going to be the local workforce investment areas, their procurement processes and procedures are supposed to be followed, and you must document your procurements. Document them as best you can and as completely as you can, because that is something we will look at when we monitor these grants. And I list the references there from the uniform administrative requirements for the state and local governments and the nonprofit and hospitals and organizations of higher institutions there. Procurement, it does list anything that you would have to, how you would document that sole source. It also has all the other methods like small purchase, bid procedures. Just, you have to document it and make sure you follow your procurement procedures that are in place. And when it comes to procurement, when you're relating this to partner organizations, for someone to be considered a partner and, they would be able to use funds from this grant without having to go out and procure their services or do a request for application or an RFP for their services, that partner must be integral to the effort that is being conducted here for the WIF. They would be a partner in all aspects of development of the application, One example would be if it's the project operator, they would be considered a partner. A service provider is not considered a partner in these cases. Another way to think of it is if this person left the table for this project and they weren't going to take part in it, if their absence would lead to the complete project failure, then they would be a partner. And it is kind of limited, so you kind of got to be careful on how you determine, yes, they're a partner in this project. And that'll probably be determined when we're doing the application reviews as to whether it's really considered a partner or not. There are some exceptions, but I don't know that there would be too many exceptions in these cases, but it would be only if the federal requirements would allow it. And partner activities would be specified in your scope of work or the implementation plan. And if for some reason you would have to have some sort of change in the scope of the grant, just because they're a partner does not give them preferential treatment to receive more money to perform those new services that are in that change in that scope of the grant. Those new activities would be subject to any procurement rules, and it would require a modification to the grant. One of the things with this grant, there is a requirement for leveraged resources. That requirement is 20% of the grant to be leveraged. It can be done as in-kind, and there will be a budget template that you'll get that will have space where you can identify what those leveraged resources will be.
Okay, thanks, Sheila. So what are we going to be looking for in the application? We need you to demonstrate that you've got a robust partnership that is ready to work together to make something innovative happen. So are the key organizations in the region participating? Give us a clear explanation of partner roles. That helps you out so that everyone understands, what it is that they're going to participate or how they're going to participate, but us to understand it as well. As we spoke about earlier, formal commitments and what the level of commitment of each partner is, and then lay out the process that you want to use to hire your project manager. Also be looking at the innovation design and how each partner will contribute to that design. It's going to lead to different and desired outcomes. And then also is the innovation measurable? We got to have a way to measure it in order to do the evaluation. So if it's not measurable, then it's not particularly useful for this particular effort. On the budget, give us a clear and concise description of what you are funding under each line item. We will be looking at it for appropriateness and reasonableness. Typically there are ballpark figures that people use for cost per client that we all kind of look at and say, okay, that looks reasonable for what it is they're doing. We're going to look at that as well here. However, in this case, because we're trying new and different things, that cost per client might be wildly different than what we're used to. So you need to explain to us what it is you're doing and why the cost per client might be lower or higher than might be customarily expected for the type of services you're providing. And then, of course, identify the leverage resources and who's providing those and how much and in what form. And, of course, respond to all elements of the RFA. Be clear and concise. We will not measure the quality of the application by how much it weighs. So just speak to the points clearly and briefly but fully, and you'll be good. There's no need to say the same thing 4 or 5 times and add pages to it just for the sake of having a thicker application. And then, of course, be on time, and we went over the due dates earlier in the presentation. So those are the key things we'll be looking for when we evaluate the applications that came in. So With that, we have several questions that are in the chat room already, so we'll start with those, and then as we go down those, if people can raise their hand, then your phone can be unmuted if we want to have a discussion about it. So starting at the top here, again, the applicants of record are the local workforce boards or their fiscal agent. So, you know, hopefully the partners are working together to create the application, but, you know, the partner and the grantee of record is going to be the workforce board, so that's, you know, who should send in the application on behalf of the region.
Can we maybe take a minute to talk more about what they should be doing right now to bring partners together, the next steps, calling people, having meetings, that kind of thing, because
Sure.
it isn't just an LWIP that can submit, it is the partnership. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And that plays into the second part of who are the regions. The regions are who you all decide they are. It could vary in geographic area depending on the region of the state you're in. And, you know, we're looking for you to have partners that can add value to the innovation effort that help meet the needs of employers. So, you know, the partners need to work together on the application and submit as a region on behalf of the entire partnership. But, you know, the LWIB will be the grantee, so that's who we're looking for in there. But it has to be a partner effort, not just the grantee sending it in without any of the other partners' involvement.
And maybe I can amplify a little bit on this. The STEM Learning Exchange that's being developed for Illinois under the Race to the Top grant, we very quickly realized that if we tried to create one statewide STEM Learning Exchange, we'd have 500 people in the room and nothing would get done. So I'm looking to develop 6 to 8 regional STEM Learning Exchanges. And then when we learned that this innovation grant was coming down the pike and would allow us to better integrate the work of the local workforce boards in areas, we held off in trying to ascribe what the 6 to 8 regions would look like until after you all got a chance to determine whether or not you wanted to be part of this innovation grant. We were looking at trying as best we could to align the regional STEM learning or a defined geographic area to look at. It's not as easy as one might think when you get up into the suburbs, but you know, I've tried a couple of different versions, and we can make this work fairly well. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of the history so that when you are looking at setting up a regional approach versus a city suburban type approach, that perhaps when you look at a map that contains the community college districts, it becomes a little clearer.
So with that, the direct answer to the question, are the regions for WIF bound by the community college borders? No, they're not. But as Jim explained, it's probably a good place, especially downstate where the geographic regions of the districts are much larger. It's probably a good place to start to think about which partners and what geographic areas might make sense for you. But no, you're not bound by those districts.
Also, I had an email this week, a question from a community college, this is Levon, from a community college, about, and the first part was already answered, you know, the LWIB is the fiscal agent grant recipient, et cetera. But per discussion that took place at the Chicago WIF bidders conference, Mike, you had brought up that any entity could actually call people together and begin the discussion.
Right.
It didn't have to, you don't have, with all due reference, you don't have to wait on an LWIB. Someone could actually take the initiative to pull partners together to begin the discussion. However, I did suggest that this person, this college, I did suggest to this college and other colleges that they may want to begin and call their local workforce board and just see where they are on this. But CBO or any entity could call partners together and say, hey, I want to work on this. What about you?
Exactly. And also, for folks that have a relatively wide geographic service area, you may be able to protect one of the partners has a coverage area that is in multiple regional partnerships. There's no reason that they couldn't participate in more than one. So it just depends on how you all work that out and what innovation method you want to try. So again, you have some flexibility there. Okay. On the next question, do the regional partners need to be exclusively in Illinois, about bordering areas that border? This question came up in Springfield, and our thinking at this time is, you need to look at the regions that make sense for you. So if there is a key partner that happens to be across a political border, that's not necessarily a stumbling block, but you would need to explain, why that partner is integral to the effort and what they bring to the table. And actually that may help in meeting our targeted numbers, okay? But especially if you're looking at an out-of-state partner, we're going to be looking very closely at what that partner would bring to the table and how it helps the innovation effort.
Can I say about the INAM initiative, the Advanced Manufacturing through the TAA award? I think that looking at the connections with that are really a great idea. There was some confusion about at the first seminar, there was a confusion about someone had said, one of the colleges had said INAM could do training, someone said INAM couldn't do training, and INAM can't do training of the clients. It's more of an infrastructure capacity building. So that's why it's such a great fit to work with that initiative.
Okay. And then Pam had a question about going beyond serving WIA eligibles in the treatment group.
We were on. I'm sorry, Pam.
Well, the eligibility requirements is defined by DOL, say WIA adult and WIA dislocated worker, and so that's the final word on that.
And the INAM stuff I just
Right.
talked about in the wrong order.
Right. That's
Sorry.
okay. You're good. Okay. Pam had a question on assignment of folks in the groups, and will they be assigned to a specific LWIA within the partnership? I would think, I'm thinking that they would be assigned as they roll in, but I'll defer to Jerry.
No, we will know, again, this is something that we'll have to iron out with the evaluator once they're on board, but I would think they would get assigned to the control group, and then whatever arrangement, whatever agreement that you've reached between the local workforce areas, you can split those control group individuals, by LWIA, whatever, whether it's from their, area of residence or any other way that you guys come up with. I mean, it doesn't really matter to the project, I don't believe.
So, okay, so can I take this just a little bit further? So I know Pam's concern was that one LWIA could get hit with all the control. And so, or a disproportionately large amount of the control people could be in one LWIA and a multiple LWIA region. So you're saying that they could agree that among the LWIAs, they could, even though those clients could primarily be in one LWIA, are then you saying they could say, okay, we've got 3 LWIAs, we're each going to take a third?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing that prohibits
okay.
that.
So maybe that helps Pam, because I know that's was a concern.
Right. We understand your concern about that, and we will have to work that out with the evaluator when he comes on board. But that will be a key part of the discussion, is how we limit one individual workforce area's exposure to a performance issue. So, that issue is on our radar, and we'll try to work through that.
Yeah. Both performance and, fiscal.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Bill asked, is there funding for the development of specific training programs for the treatment group? Innovative training could certainly be part of the treatment group. You would have to develop it rather quickly. You couldn't start doing a curricula from scratch right now and then hope to start enrolling people a year from now. But if you can do something innovative that's different and get it up and going quickly, that certainly could be on the table. Matt asked, are there admin dollars under the grant? No, they're not. All of the activity under your grant that comes to you will be considered program activity. So staff time from a local area that would be spent on the initiative could be funded from the WIF grant, or could be funded locally if you like as a leveraged resource. But in either way, you just charge it to personal services and salaries and the line items that are out there rather than admin. And our next question, what does the treatment group imply? Yes, in this case, it does sound kind of medical. They are undergoing the innovation services. So the treatment group are the folks that receive whatever innovative things that we're coming up with to try. The control group does not. So it's just a simple way to define those.
Can I say something about
Sure.
that too? It's Levon. A treatment would not necessarily mean training either, because your innovation could be in recruitment, your innovation could be in capacity building, your innovation could be in expanding the number of instructors to open up more training opportunity. So in the sense that it would have to be that the training could already be there, but you just need to expand your options for getting people into that training. That's an innovation also. I mean, we talked about that at one of the others.
Right, right. So the key is, though, that the people in the treatment group
Right.
are receiving the innovation.
Right.
The people in the control group receive the standard and customary services they would have received had we never heard of WIF.
Yeah. Those were terms that were brought to us by the National Evaluation Coordinator, and we just use them the same way they do.
I think it's important to keep is going to be unique about this, because this is not funding to provide services the way you normally do.
Right.
This isn't just another WIA grant to serve another 100 people. This is something where we look to you to come up with innovative ideas based on your circumstances, your situation, your environment, your partners, your resources. And so we've presented the key innovation that we're talking about at the state level has to do with acceleration, recognizing, as we've talked about before, that people need to get through quickly. Otherwise, we're likely to lose them. They need to get their paychecks. They need to get in and out of training. So we look for acceleration to benefit the participants, but we also look for acceleration to benefit the employers. They need people and they need them quickly. They don't want to wait around for a year or two. So the key innovation for the project is acceleration that we've talked about, but we look to you also as you're developing your design. What else can you do? What else can you bring to the table to make this innovative? So when we talk about the project, we've got funded through the WIF grant. This grant is the innovation, is the intervention. The control group that would be funded out of WIA funds would be your traditional, your regular WIA services. So in measuring the two as far as the outcomes of those, we would expect to see them different enough that we aren't comparing apples to apples. There truly is a difference between the two projects, between the two program designs.
Perfect, absolutely. Okay, I'm responding to David's question both verbally and in the chat room.
Do not wait, right.
No. Organizations do not need to wait for the local board to come to them. If you have a willingness to participate, have ideas about how to innovate, those from the state perspective are welcome. So You are feel free to call up other partners, call up the WIB, however you want to pull a group together and say, hey, we have an idea, can we discuss this? We'd like to participate, we think we can add value. It's up to all of you to determine what it is you eventually want to try and who you eventually want to have at the table, but it just needs to be done by a group of willing partners. So our advice to the local board staff and local Title I-B administrators on the call, if you do get an email or a call from a CBO, a community college, another organization, it behooves you to listen to what those folks have to put on the table and see what value might spring up from that, and include them in the process to the extent that your region and the direction you guys want to go. So again, we're not forcing anyone to come together, but if someone has an idea, if I were you, I would listen closely and carefully, and they may have something great to try.
I should mention, I've heard also that in some areas, local or economic development agencies are kicking this off. So it might be them that initiates this. So from whatever angle it comes, from whatever entity, it is a matter of people getting together, reaching out, and starting those conversations. The sooner the better.
Right.
Does that affect the economic development? Is that an issue in terms of how that economic development might receive funding since they're not allowed to do economic development? I'm just
Being a
asking.
partner at the table doesn't
Okay.
mean necessarily you're getting resources.
Okay,
There
that's all I
is-
was, okay,
yeah.
got it.
Right.
Right. And just to follow up, back to our early point, your partners at the table ought to include manufacturing employers in your region. You need to touch base with them and see what their needs are, and so whatever you do is tailored to the need in your region, however you define it, so that when folks come out of the treatment group, you've got a group of employers that are already on board and say, hey, this is our need. If you can give us folks with this skill set, we're ready to make use of them and put them on board, to the extent possible.
And that just goes back to the point that the community colleges have a lot of contacts in the manufacturing community too. It could be a great help in determining which manufacturers are already sort of at the table, are really, just can be a help in selection.
Right. And Jim Nelson, who is on the call with us today, is heading up the statewide manufacturing learning exchange effort, the Pathways Initiative effort. So he can be a resource for you all to reach out to connect with employers and manufacturers in your region if you feel like you need help in brokering that arrangement and getting employers to the table. He has already done groundwork across the state, and Jim, if you'd like to speak to this, feel free, about making sure that manufacturers are engaged with us so that they know this is out there for the most part. Hopefully this won't be a surprising shock to anybody if you came to their door and said, hey, we're trying this. They've already been put on notice that this is coming and that this is something that could be helpful to them and would be helpful if they participated. But by chance, if you get to a manufacturer that hasn't heard of it and seems to be reluctant to want to play, Jim is a resource that, if you think they are vital or would be very helpful to your regional initiative, Jim is a resource that he might be able to help start a conversation with them and help you out with that. Yeah, anything you'd like to add, Jim?
No, you covered it pretty well.
Right. So, are there any other questions? I see David is typing.
He asked one. About doing them.
Did we get everything from above?
We didn't ask
Scroll up, I'm
Pam.
not sure.
Oh,
Pam's question about the innovation is in the recruitment front
that
end.
came up
Right
and
there.
somehow,
Oh, I'm sorry, we skipped
Yeah.
Pam's question. If the innovation and recruitment front end passed, how can you recruit? Okay, the recruitment, and Jerry, jump in if I go too far off the reservation here, but the recruitment can be the innovation effort because you're tailoring this for manufacturing, which ordinarily we wouldn't do as part of WIA. Okay, so this is something different right off the get-go, that we're doing a couple of screenings to find folks that would be eligible for manufacturing. So once that screening is done, then the folks can be randomly assigned into the two groups.
Yeah.
Anything to add to that?
No. When we spoke to the national evaluator again and talked about those kind of things that, might be the same with both groups, in this instance, the recruitment, they're going to look for commonalities and differences and make note of that, our state evaluator. So, so there'll be a note to that effect when people look at the numbers that, the control group was also part of the recruitment, intense recruitment effort or something to that effect. But, and it's something that they suggested we be sure to let them know, so.
Okay, I'm typing in Jim's email now, and then I'll add his phone number.
You can also have more than one innovation.
Certainly.
So within your, keep saying innovation, but you can have innovations.
As long as they're measurable.
Yeah, there's some
There's
that are
some
still up
questions
there.
up above, yeah, that,
Okay, we'll scroll back up here and see what we can catch. And are the phones unmuted?
Pam said we missed something. Probably in the one above that, above the Pam. There we go. Right,
Keep going.
a little bit down.
Oh, I thought it was.
Okay, keep going up.
Yeah.
It keeps.
Your microphone has been turned
Pam's
on.
got a really nice long
Right,
message.
okay, here, so, will the IMA be providing any services we can apply to the 20% requirement for leveraged funds? Well, the IMA is a state partner at this level, but the IMA will also be involved with the regional learning exchanges. So, I would say potentially yes, but you'd have to describe what those are, and we'd have to take a look at it. I don't want to give you a solid yes or no now because that's an interesting question, but I would like to give folks a chance to describe what that might look like to us.
Yeah,
What we would
Pam,
do-
this is Jim Nelson from the IMA. I'm not exactly sure what type of services you would be looking for from us to apply to that in-kind requirement. It might be something worth a discussion at some point, if you can put some meat on those bones.
Yeah, I mean, that might be a case if you have that in your application and we look at it and get a better understanding of it, we might have to say, no, that really doesn't apply. We'll have to find another way to fulfill that requirement. But, if that's something you want to put on the table, talk about it with Jim and the manufacturing team before you put your application in, and we'll do our best to help you figure that one out. That's an interesting question.
Was there one above there from that, David? Because I had a question down
Are we
there.
going to get in
He
trouble
wanted to know
if we form?
if an organization could sue them for not inviting them.
Oh, he has it here, so,
Well, no, it's
No,
above that.
there was
It's actually
another.
a separate one above that.
okay, can you go back up?
It's a little more.
Whoa, no,
A little
a
more
little bit
noise.
down, a little bit down. Keep going.
I think it was towards the bottom.
No, it was below that other
Yeah,
question.
Yeah, it was down.
Keep going out.
Yeah, so let's,
It's just thing. And then he had that question. Then there was a question I thought later on about.
Okay, so you're going to get in
Yeah,
trouble if we
before
form a
that.
partnership and later find out we forgot to invite an organization. Well,
can we make sure, there's a difference between procurement and partnership. When we talk about partnership and this being a regional partnership, we want organizations, entities to be at the table developing this initiative, bringing to the table their information, their perspective, their knowledge, their statistics, whatever it is that they have to help shape the design of the project. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're at the table, there's money involved. That's a separate issue, is procurement. So as the program is designed and developed, yes, there might be people at the table or not at the table
Vendor
who will, as a
relationship.
part of carrying out the project, be receiving funds and have to follow procurement guidelines. But I guess I want to be clear, when we're talking about getting to the people's table, getting partners to the table and talking, you need to decide who it is, at the local level, regional level, that can play a role in this project and the success of the project. Get them talking, and from there come up with your design and develop the project. Separate issue, procurement.
Right.
If these are going to follow the pattern of the STEM learning exchanges, I think you're going to find that these are fairly dynamic groups where, as we move forward, since we've never been down this road before, you're going to find people that you originally did not think of that ought to be within that partnership. And, it may be that it's an ongoing recruiting and, substitution here and there, and some people are going to leave. So we know that to be a true fact as well in these things, so.
Then it will be any opportunity to fund incumbent worker training. Incumbent worker training is an allowable activity under the waiver, so that could be part of your innovation effort.
But keep in mind, though, these do have to be adults and dislocated workers. We don't have a separate population in this grant, incumbent workers. So any training provided to someone as an employee of an organization, of a company, that person has to be an adult or dislocated worker.
Absolutely. So keep in mind, incumbent worker can be used strictly and loosely. I took the loose interpretation there, but strictly an incumbent worker is someone that's not WIA eligible and is served under the incumbent worker set-aside that you all have or the statewide activity funding. But someone can be working and still be WIA eligible. So in the context of that, yes, somebody that's WIA eligible but also has a job with an employer conceivably could be admitted to the project. But you're not going to know if they're going to go into treatment or control group either. So that's, that complicates it as well. Okay, back to Pam's question about control group.
You kind of answered.
She just had a comment there.
Okay.
Mitch, we already answered it. We answered that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then,
Pam, we think we've answered both of these that are on the screen now. If you're still unclear about it, let us know.
There was a question about suing them
Yeah.
for not inviting them.
Well, it's America, so anybody can sue anybody for anything at any time, but I would think your risk would be pretty minimal. I wouldn't lose any sleep over that one. Okay, then we put Jim's contacts in the screen.
And Michael's question. Right there.
you could be a partner or a service provider, or it depends on the role that is developed as you come to the table. Originally, I think you start out as a partner, I think, because it's critical that you're at the table as things are being designed, but it could be determined depending on the innovations that you all come up with. A community college may, could remain a partner, which can be unfunded or funded, or could be, or if you've got several community colleges, more than one in an area, one may become the service provider or, quote, the vendor. The others are partners, or the other way around. You can play all those roles, but it's going to be defined by your innovations and your entire partnership. Is that?
Yeah, look, think for example, if you had a regional effort that included multiple community college districts, one of the innovations that you might be able to try is that for everybody in that region, they get the in-district tuition rate, regardless of which college they're attending. It may be that one college has the resources to provide the training, and everybody within your self-defined region goes to that one college, but may reside in a different community college district. Maybe you could work out an arrangement that everybody in your region gets the same lowest rate at the college providing the training, whether they live in that college district or not. That's just one idea.
Never mind.
Okay, we just talked about incumbent workers. Okay, so Julian, yes, you have it right.
Yep.
That's exactly one way it could work. Okay, folks who aren't selected, even though identified as good candidates, they would still benefit from customary services that they would have received had we not heard of WIF. So they could still be placed in manufacturing training at a provider that provides appropriate training for what it is they want to go into. So, yeah, they can be trained as well. They're just not part of the treatment group. Yeah, okay, so we spoke to the income worker. As long as they're WIA eligible, they can be working. Okay, that was question and answer, thank you. Yes, we will have a Q&A, I think, let's see, is it the next page here? Yeah. At the WIF page on Illinois WorkNet, there will be a Q&A section posted. So all of the questions that have come up through the bidders conferences and this webinar, and then also that might come to us as you think of things as you get into it, will be posted online, and they'll be categorized by different methods. And then those will be posted for everybody to see. So if you think of a question later, please submit it here at Illinois WorkNet, and we will post the answer for everyone to see.
Can I answer Andrew's question or take a stab at it and then you can jump in?
Sure.
Andrew, oh, just lost it. Okay.
You've got to scroll back
Yeah.
up to catch the...
Andrew, you could be a partner and still do that training, going back to what was said earlier, depending if you were considered an integral part, that the innovation could not succeed without that particular involvement. Or the partnership could determine that that is a vendor responsibility, depending on that. So once again, you could be either, but it's going to depend on how the partnership structures the innovations, what you all decide on, and what you come up with as to that particular role. You could be either, depending on if you're seen as integral, a partner with the big P, as they said, or a service provider, quote, vendor, in which case that would have to be procured. The partner would not have to be procured, but you could do the same thing in either category. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, it's a very confusing issue.
Yeah.
But the idea is that if your organization is integral to the success of the initiative, then you are a partner with a big P, and your services do not have to be procured. However, if your role in the partnership is providing, let's just say
Only as a vendor.
let's just say CNC training, because that's the one that's put out there. But there are other providers of that service, and your only role is, we're going to provide this particular training. You haven't been involved in the planning of the initiative. Just the partnership came to you and said, hey,
Yeah, exactly.
This is what we want to provide training in. We know you do that. What would it cost us to send our folks to you?
And that has to be procured.
So then, if there are other folks in the region as you define it, that provide that same service, then all that stuff has to go through procurement. Okay? And then there are all sorts of factors that go into selecting on procurement. The track record, the quality, the price. You guys all should know, in the local area should know about, how to procure those things and follow the policy there. So, if you have questions as you go through it and have a specific example, let us know, and we'll help you out with it. And then scrolling back up here, because I think that Julian's comment, yes, you have it right. A trainer could provide customary services and could also be providing innovation services to the treatment group. You just have to keep track of the clients, which group they're in, what services they've got, and then help us measure at the end any difference in outcomes between those two groups. I'm not sure how to respond to Andrew's statement.
And Andrew, you have, right, and many of the community colleges have that now, you know, where they come to the colleges. That's where I was referring to multiple community colleges in one of these regions that chances are, you know, the region could determine that you're all going to be partners. The region could determine that, the partnership could determine that one college is going to be the service provider, the quote vendor, the others are going to be partners. Those are all options, but you all have to work it out.
Michael asked, could the individuals in the treatment group receive a portion of the service? Yes. The treatment group gets the full gamut of the innovation services. So if part of the innovation service includes training that you have always provided, there are examples, I can imagine instances where the control group could get the same training. But you have to look at what the innovation is in this particular instance, though. Is the innovation just about recruitment, and then the training for both groups is the same? That's a possibility. But you just have to define, you know, what the innovation is, who's getting it, and just make sure that the people in the control group don't get the innovation service.
One thing that was explained to us is that when we talk about the innovation or we talk about the intervention for the treatment group, it was suggested to us by the evaluator that as you look at your design, that you look at your traditional WIA services, and then you build on that and come up with 3, 4, 5 innovations. Something unique, innovative, something that's going to help impact the outcomes for workers and for employers. So try to identify and key in on, and that's something you're going to have to address in your proposal to us. We asked specifically about your innovation. Take your traditional WIA services and then build on that. Again, 3, 4, 5, 6 innovations that are going to help impact the success of the project. And that's what the treatment group is going to be getting above and beyond what the control group would be getting.
And Andrew, let me give you my number. This is Levon at ICCB. I think maybe I'll be helping colleges and, you know, I'm working with DCO on this. It's 217-557-2742. And give me a call and we can talk more about this. And I can help you as you're working. So.
Better repeat your number. That was
21. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll put it on the screen.
Okay.
217.
You want to put my email there too?
What's your name?
557-2742. And it's L. Nelson. Oh, no, Levon.Nelson. I'm sorry. They changed. I still forget. At Illinois.gov. Levon.Nelson at Illinois.gov. Okay. So any of the colleges or adult ed providers could give me a call. No.
Okay. Well, I'm looking at my watch. We've run about 10 minutes over our scheduled time, so we'll do one last call for questions. And again, you can type questions into the Illinois WorkNet site, and we'll get to those and get answers posted very shortly. But we do have to make sure that we will be gathering questions from both sessions and this session for the rest of the day and tomorrow, and we plan to have those posted by tomorrow at the latest. And we will add to it, you know, as people add questions as you get into it, you know, the Q&A posted on Illinois WorkNet will grow for everyone to see.
And if state partners get questions, should we forward those to you so you can add them to the Q&A, like I got a question or not?
Ideally, all the questions should be directed
Okay,
at Illinois
okay,
WorkNet.
Okay,
And then we would forward,
Okay.
if there was a question we needed
okay,
to
fine,
check
that's
with you on,
fine,
we
I
would do
just
that.
wanted to
Andrew
clarify.
says they're not gonna call you until January.
Okay, that's fine.
Right.
That's fine, Andrew.
Right, and the reason for that is, I mean, you're free to call ICCB, to ask, background questions and
that's
things like
kind- yeah.
that. But for questions on, how to implement and how to
Right.
go about it,
I didn't mean to get...
for it to be fair for everyone that's interested in applying, because it is a competitive grant, we need to make sure that everybody sees the questions and the answers, so it's a level playing field.
Right.
Okay. So with that, it doesn't look like anyone's typing at this point.